Hello students and welcome back to my channel, and today we will discuss about the preface to Lyrical Ballad written by William Wordsworth. So let's get into the details. It is the collection of poems published as Lyrical Ballad in 1798 by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge, and has traditionally been set as the birthplace of English Romanticism. So these are the key points. It has been shown as the romantic movement, a guide which shows how a poem should be, a transition line between neoclassical era and romantic era, and a transition from scientific logic to nature. We can analyze lyrical ballads under three headlines. First is qualification of a poet, language of a poem, and topics of a poem. So first we look out the life. William Wordsworth was born in 1770 in a little town in a Lake District in a northwest of England. In 1787, he entered Cambridge, and while still a university student, he went on the 3 months walking tour of France and Swiss Alps and Italy, and was greatly impressed by the beauty of landscape. So when he finished his degree, he returned to France and became a passionate supporter of the democratic ideas of French Revolution. So in 1794, he went to live with his sister Dorothy in village Dorset. In the same year, he met Samuel Taylor Coleridge, a poet with similar radical political views. This friendship has a lasting impact on both poets. So William and Dorothy went to live close to Coleridge. Together, they discussed political issues, read, wrote, exchanged theories on poetry, and commented on each other's work. So, in this period of intense creativity, they produced the Lyrical Ballads, a collection of poems, and the second edition of 1800 contained Wordsworth's famous Preface, which was to become the manifesto of English Romanticism. In 1799, William and Dorothy moved to Grasmere, one of the loveliest villages, a region that Wordsworth immortalized with his poetry. So his life can be divided into four periods: childhood and youth, university life, travels around the world, and revolutionary experience, the Great Decade, and the final period. Three things clearly emerges from his poem. Firstly, he loved to be alone and never felt lonely in nature. Secondly, he felt the presence of some living spirit, real through unseen. And thirdly, his impressions of nature were delightfully familiar. So, as a poet, he was one of giants of English poetry. Plenty of inferior work written by him. He has historical importance. His theories of poetry and the revolution he effected. He, as a poet of nature, as a poet of childhood, as a poet of pot reflection and philosophical thought, and his lyrical gift. So ballads show the primarily laws of human nature, low and rustic life, and the language of rustic people, conception of a poet and poetry, revolutionary and democratic sentiments as the basic of his poetic theory. And the theory of poetic diction, the language of conversation in the middle and lower classes of society by a selection of language really used by men, Coleridge criticism, lessening the range of emotion, poetry as a spontaneous overflow of emotion, poetry as the expression of emotion recollected in tranquility, the service done by Wordsworth to poetry, meter and poetry. These are some major points. The lyrical ballad gives the lyrical aspect to of the volume, and it calls about the metaphysics of the imagination, and it talks about the life of the sense, a challenge to the general poetry reading habits, and it includes Wordsworth democratic sympathies. It includes Brankworth's poem and the disintegration brought about the volume. Wordsworth, as the poet of nature, he was a great innovator. He found his great inspiration in nature. His poetry offers an account of the interaction between man and nature, of influences, emotion, sensation, which arises from his contact. His main interest in the poet's response to a natural object, and he is one of the most consistent concepts in his poetry, is the idea that man and nature are inseparable. He says that man is an active participant in the natural world, and nature is something that includes both inanimate and human nature. Each is the part of the same whole. Nature confronts man in sorrow. Nature is a source of pleasure and joy. Nature teaches man to love and to act in a moral way. And Wordsworth poetry celebrates the life of simple rural people. He seems them more sincere than people living in cities. So his concept of poetry believed that intuition, not reason, should guide the poet. Inspiration should come from the direct experience of the senses, and Wordsworth exploited especially the sensibility of the eye and ear. The poetry he wrote in the preface originates from the spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling which is filtered through emotion and recollected in tranquility. And memory plays a fundamental role in the creative process of poetry, and poetry is the result from the active relationship of present to past experience. So, through the recreative power of memory, the emotions is reproduced and purified in the poetic form so that a second emotion, kindred to the first one, is generated. So this is the total diagram. What he would say, the entire process would be an object, then it goes to the poet, then it's sensory experience, then emotion, then what is the memory and the recollection of in tranquility, recollection of thoughts, and then kindred emotion, and it converts into the poem, and poem converts into the reader emotion. He says that the poet has a greater sensibility and the ability to penetrate the heart of the things, and the power of imagination enables him to communicate his knowledge. The poet becomes a teacher who shows men how to understand their feeling and improve their moral being. And the poet task consists in drawing attention to the ordinary things of life, to the humblest people, where the deepest emotion and truths are to be found. So the features of lyrical ballads is the chief aim is the composition of poems in the lyrical ballads has been to choose the incident and situation from common life and at the same time throw over them and coloring of imagination, whereby the ordinary things would be presented to the mind in an unusual aspect. So the preface to the lyrical ballad was mainly written to explain the theory of poetry, guiding Wordsworth's composition of the poem, and he defends the unusual style and subjects of the poem. Some of them may have been actually composed by Coleridge as experiments to see how far and accurately popular poetry could be used to convey profound feeling. And in this preface, Wordsworth wanted to express this theory of poetry. The preface is therefore a justification of that theory and of the themes and style of the poem in lyrical ballads. In his preface, Wordsworth set himself in opposition to 18th century poets like Pope. He claims they imposed artificial conventions on the free and natural development of poetry. And this is the quote: poetry is far is the breadth and finest spirit of all knowledge, and it is the impassionate expression which is in the countenance of all signs. Motto of this ballad is to return to nature. They turn away from the artificial urban life and found refuge in the country, life, and nature. They worshipped nature, loved of nature for them, meant to love of mankind, humanism, and a more worldview that encompassed the idea of freedom and equality. So the preface can be divided into four main parts: the content, the language, the poet, and the poetry. So it call upon the lyrics. In ancient Greek, a lyric was a song to accompany music from a lyre. Later word has been used any short poem which personal mood and emotions are expressed nowadays. A word popular song called lyrics, and he called as a ballad. A ballad is a poem or song. It usually tells a story in a popular language of the day and has association with traditional folk culture, and it built on an experiment, and it varied in form and broke with the traditions of the new classical era that preceded, and the scene of common life versus an epic literature. Both has been differentiated between them. So I hope you like this video and you understand the major points, what he want to convey and what he wants to say between the literature and the common life of the people, and with among with the nature, people who live in the nature, and from where the poetry aroused and came from the emotions as well. So I hope you like this video, and please like and subscribe to my channel, and if you want anything further, so chat me on my ping me on my chat box. Thank you so much.